Go ahead with the little one. Wow. What the fuck, bro? It's right there. Okay. Alright, so today we're going to test 3 range of motion and 3 muscle manual tests, different regions of the body. Each of them contain a lower extremity, spine region or spinal region, and a upper extremity. For the range of motion, we're going to test test radial deviation, which occurs in the frontal plane about the anterior and posterior axis. Also, the landmarks to palpate for would be the capitate, which is one of the carpal bones. Also, we're going to use a small goniometer to measure range of motion, and the average range of motion for radial deviation is 20 degrees. The stationary arm will bisect the ulna and the radius, and the capitate sits right about here. The mobile arm will be aligned over the third metacarpal. So again, axis of rotation at the capitate. So we want to palpate. Here's our ulnar styloid process. So it'll be in the center of the carpal bones, which means in the center superior or proximal to or at the wrist joint center of the carpal bones. That's where the capitate is located. So again, you want to palpate, make sure you have the right region. Our stationary arm again bisects the 2 bones at the arm, and the mobile arm is along the third metacarpal. So go ahead and perform your radial deviation. Okay, so let's keep that in the center here. So Sanford is measuring at 19 degrees of range of motion of radial deviation motion at the wrist. The other test that we will be doing is the cervical extension. So we're going to have him to sit on the table. Technically he will sit, excuse me, this way, but we're going to have him to kind of split the table so we can see the lateral view. While he's doing that, the landmarks are visibly seen. The axis of rotation using the large goniometer will sit at the external acoustic meatus, and the mobile arm will align at the tip of the nose, also referred to as the nares, and the stationary arm will be perpendicular to the floor. So here is our external acoustic meatus, and there's the tip of his nose, or the nares. We're going to take our stationary arm perpendicular to the floor. Our axis of rotation is at the meatus, external acoustic meatus, as I mentioned before, and we're going to align this at the nose. So let's see. Put your shoulders back. Alright, so we're at 90. So now he's going to perform cervical extension by tilting his head in a backwards motion as far as he can. Go ahead. Alright, so again, our mobile arm follows and stays aligned with the nares. So let me fix this. Alright, so acoustic meatus, and here aligned at the tip of the nose. So we're measuring at about so we're measuring at 56 degrees of cervical flexion. So I don't know if it's focused, but yeah. This motion, cervical extension, occurs in the at the sagittal plane about the medial to lateral axis. Again, don't really have to palpate for the landmarks as they are visibly seen. And the average range of motion for cervical extension is 60 degrees. The next, or the last test for range of motion will be ankle plantar flexion, but we're going to save that for the end since we have to alter the direction of the camera. All right, so on to the manual muscle test. The first one we're going to do is lumbar trunk extension. So I'm going to have him to lie prone on the table with his face that direction. And we're going to have him to have his place his hands at his side. Like that. And then we're going to have, I'm going to apply downward resistance at the ankle joints to stabilize him so that he can elevate his trunk off of the mat table. So here we are. Go ahead and elevate up as high as you can. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. All right, so in order to get a grade of a 5 for a manual muscle test of the lumbar trunk extension, you have to be able to hold that range of motion for 5 seconds against gravity with full against gravity at full range of motion with resistance applied. If he were to be or show signs of instability during that count, he will grade at a test of 4. And if he was unable to, or if with a grade of 4, if he showed instability during the count, it will give him that grade, as well as note that he can extend full range of motion against gravity, but with resistance applied, it's a little bit more difficult. And if it was a grade of a 3, he will be able to just perform the move against gravity without resistance applied, or against gravity not for 5 seconds. So it's a time-based thing, not a resistance-based thing, I should have said. The muscles that are activated during this motion are the erector spinae muscles. And there are 3 of them. There's the iliocostalis, the longissimus or the longisimus muscle, and the spinalis muscle. Each of them they're on both sides of the spine, and they together run up along the entire spine. So the iliocostalis muscle, it originates from the sacrum, coccyx, and the iliac crest. The longisimus muscle originates at the transverse processes, and it inserts at the transverse processes superior to the origin. And the range of motion for that muscle, well, they all have the same range of motion. Well, so let's finish the other one. The spinalis muscle inserts at the spinous processes superior to the origin, and the origin is the spinous process. And for the iliocostalis, the insertion is at the ribs, along the ribs. So all 3 of them are considered the erector spinae, as well as they perform the same action. So they have 2. So bilaterally, each of those muscles come together to perform extension of the spine, and that motion exists in the sagittal plane about the medial to lateral axis. The other action that they have is unilateral for side bending, which is in the frontal plane amongst the anterior to posterior axis. Yes, so the next muscle, manual muscle test that we would be performing, since he's already lying prone, would be the gluteus maximus. So we're gonna have him to bend his knee at 90 degrees. Ideally, we will be on the same side testing this leg, but I'm gonna go on the opposite side so that you can see what I'm doing. We're going to place a hand here just for support at the lumbar region or the lower back region on the same side of the testing leg. The other hand will be at the distal femur proximal to the knee joint, applying a downward resistance. He's going to elevate his leg off of the mat table. Just go ahead. And we're going to apply resistance. All right, you can release. So, with this particular test, he will obtain a grade of a 5 because he was able to perform full range of motion of the gluteus maximus, or the range of motion for activation of the gluteus maximus against gravity with full resistance applied. The gluteus maximus is here. The origin for the gluteus maximus is at the sacrum coccyx and the posterior iliac crest, or posterior crest of the ilium. The insertion is at the gluteal tuberosity and the iliotibial tract. The action is hip extension and hip external rotation. The hip extension motion occurs in the sagittal plane about the medial to lateral axis, and hip external rotation occurs in the transverse plane about the longitudinal axis. So again, the gluteus maximus is here. The areas to palpate would be that's palpable is the crest of the ilium, the posterior side. And it's easier to find if they have like dimples in their back, you can use that as a reference. So this should be about here. Another region for, the sacrum and coccyx you cannot palpate for. Going back to the erector spinae, in each of those muscles, it's easy to locate the vertebrae, and their spinal processes are palpable. However, the transverse processes are a little bit tough to locate. So the last manual muscle test that we will be performing is for the extensor carpi ulnaris. So you can go ahead and come off the table. He's going to either kneel or sit in a chair so that he can rest his forearm on the mat table.
This way?
Yeah, that's fine. So for this particular test, the extensor carpi ulnaris originates at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, which you can palpate for. It's a landmark, if you will. The other, the insertion point is at the base of the fifth metacarpal. This one, the fifth metacarpal is here. And that's where the extensor carpi ulnaris inserts. The action of the extensor carpi ulnaris is wrist extension and ulnar deviation. In order to perform the test, he will have to rest his forearm on the table and extend his wrist upward. We're going to apply resistance in the direction of flexion and radial deviation on the outside from the lateral and or closest to the fifth metacarpal. That's where we'll apply the pressure. So, if we're here, I'm going to again go in a flexion yet a radial deviation. So sort of this motion. All right, you ready? So I'll place here for support. and try to hold that position. Okay. So given that test, he will test at a 5 because he was able to perform full range of motion of the joint with wrist extension against gravity. With full resistance applied. The motion of ulnar deviation occurs in the frontal plane about the anterior to posterior axis, and the action wrist extension occurs in the sagittal plane about the medial to lateral axis. Again, the landmarks that you can use to palpate for would be the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. And if you were to perform a muscle memory test on ulnar deviation, again, it will be the same as radial deviation of what we mentioned before. You also have the ulnar styloid process. There's the radial styloid process. I believe that's it. The last one that we will do is ankle plantar flexion. So we're going to have, or I'm going to, or he can, whatever one, is going to direct the camera downwards so we can see that area. So don't mind the fumbling. So go ahead.
Take my shoes and socks
off. You could take your shoes off, yeah. Forgive me for my my really bad chipped nail polish. So while he's doing that, ankle plantar flexion, the average range of motion for that is 45 degrees. The plane of motion is sagittal, and that okay. All right, so where is it? I'm gonna use this goniometer, the large one, and the areas that are palpable are the lateral malleolus. The other landmark is the 5th metatarsal, and the fibular head is another landmark that we will need to palpate for. All right. So, the axis of rotation is at the lateral malleolus. The stationary arm aligns at the fibula or alongside the fibula, and the mobile arm aligns with the 5th metatarsal. So we want to palpate, here is the lateral malleolus, and we want to palpate for the fibular head. This is the tibial tuberosity. So here it is. So here's the fibular head. So knowing that, this stationary arm will align there. Okay. And the axis of rotation will be at the lateral malleolus. And the, relax your feet, your foot. The axis of rotation, or the most mobile arm, will be aligned at the 5th metatarsal. Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and let's see. Can you scoop back? Never mind. No, you're fine. So you're gonna go ahead and flex your foot downward. So this is plantar flexion. So lateral malleolus, axis of rotation, fibular head, palpable to align the, there it is, to align the stationary arm. And mobile arm will be, so you can see, at the 5th metatarsal. So go ahead and plant downward. Okay, you're gonna have to scoot back some. Or that works too. But it may alter our results, but we'll see what happens. So, palpating for the fibular head again to remeasure. Stationary arm there. Medial malleolus is pretty visible, but we still want to palpate for it. And here's the fifth metatarsal, so go ahead and flex your foot downward. Wait, you messed me up. Okay. Alright, so there's that. Go ahead and flex downward. Alright, so there's that. His measurement is at measurement is wrong, so let's redo this. So again, lateral malleolus, axis of rotation, fibular head is here. So there's our stationary arm, and the mobile arm is aligned with the fifth metatarsal. So go ahead and plantar flex again. Keep it there for a second. Redo this. Alright, so I'm getting the same. So maybe he's just weird, I don't know. But I have a measurement of 57 degrees of plantar flexion, which is over the top, and it could be due to altering the height of his thigh or his femur, which changes a little bit of everything since he's kind of tall. But the average range of motion for plantar flexion is 45 degrees. What else? I think that's it. Yeah, we're good.